Welcome, badass friends, to this episode of the Badassladies Club. I'm here with my good friend Jessica and our good friend Jackie.
Yeah.
Here to break down spirituality versus religion and all that good, yummy stuff. But before we start, maybe we should introduce our badass of the week this week.
Well, our badass of the week this week is Jackie Rothschild. Oh my gosh. So, Jackie and I go back to the 7th grade from St. Maria Goretti Catholic School.
SMG.
Jackie is my dearest, bestest friend, my soul sister, my ride or die, and I love her with all my heart. And she is also what we call an alpha omega. Yes. Which I don't know is an official thing.
No.
Okay. It is now.
So for those of you who don't know what that is, that means that Jackie from preschool to graduating college only had Catholic school private education. She's never had like public school education. Nope. So we thought that Jackie would be the perfect addition to this episode where we're talking religion versus spirituality. And I'm a terrible best friend. And when Laurie and I were talking about it, I was like, we should have Jackie because she's a theology major. And then you corrected me and you were like, I'm not a theology major.
Correct.
So break down what the difference between religious studies versus a theology study is.
Theology, people who are theology majors are really focused on God, like all aspects of God, like what is the nature of God? How does God interact with this world? As a religious studies major, I focus on how humans view God and all the different religions of the world. And we get some, philosophy and some God in there, but it's much more kind of anthropological in its approach.
And that is why you are the perfect addition to this episode.
And I was telling Jessica, I knew that you had been in your Catholic school education for your entire education. I had no idea that you had this degree in religious studies. And when we talked about it and you explained exactly what it was, I am completely fascinated by this. Because it means that you have actual book smarts that Jessica and I don't have to throw into this, but also because it encompasses lots of religions and lots of perspectives, and that it's related to how humans work into this whole conversation with spirituality and religion, which is exactly what we want to talk about today. So welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for being badass of the week and getting on here on this podcast. This is the first time that we've had a badass and guest all in the same episode.
Yes,
it's awesome.
And very last minute, mind you.
Right.
I literally texted Jackie just a few days ago, and I was like, so are you available? And of course, being the amazing person she is, agreed to do this.
And here she is.
Thank you.
So kicking off this conversation about spirituality, religion, are they the same thing? Are they different? Are they at odds? Whatever. We always like to start with this idea that we want to be respectful and honor all perspectives on spirituality and religion, and that I have wanted to do this as a topic for a long time. But have been intimidated, or concerned,
right.
That it was going to be a topic that was going to be hard to talk about. But after the three of us connecting about it, and definitely with having Jackie here, I feel really confident and excited about what we're going to get into today. So the first stat that I found when we were doing research on it was from a Gallup News article from March of 2021. So from this year, this is a pretty current one, that U.S. church membership falls below the majority, and they mean the majority of the population, for the first time in history.
Wow.
And this is a quote from the article. The decline in church membership is primarily a function of the increasing number of Americans who express no religious preference. Over the past 2 decades, the percentage of Americans who do not identify with any religion has grown from 8% from 1998 to 2000 up to 13% when we're looking at 2008 to 2010, and then up further to 21% over the past 3 years. So that there are a lot more Americans that are saying they have no religious affiliation. And the first thing that I think is really fascinating to talk about is what is the difference between being religious and being spiritual? because spiritual seems to have a lot wider scope than like a specific religion, as it were. So what do you guys think about the idea of like religion versus spirituality? Same, different, like not the same? How would you characterize that?
Goodness. I would I feel like whenever you said like religion versus spirituality, first thing that popped into mind was like, y'all are my spiritual friends and I'm like the religious friend. So I felt a little like Jet Sharks and I was like, let's go. Like,
Jet Sharks, like it's West Side Story.
Love it.
Oh
but
my God.
I would say like what defines like a religion is something kind of codified, something a little more organized and a little more structured. And there are, positives and negatives with any structure, but one of the negatives that you see and that is very, since it's such a personal thing, a religion that gets kind of personally inflamed by that structure is you have to decide like what is not a part of the religion.
Yeah.
And it causes some ostracization of individuals.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of those things, whereas spirituality is kind of like that personal relationship, kind of having that, dynamic relationship with a higher being, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And then people in religions are going to be spiritual and have that personal relationships, but that religion's going to decide what it is and what it isn't throughout its history.
Yeah, so I could totally agree with that assessment. I feel like religious people are spiritual, but spiritual people aren't necessarily religious.
Right.
Yeah.
And for me, growing up Catholic, there are things about Catholicism that I love. It makes me feel at home and safe and nostalgic.
Yeah.
And so if I were to ever go back to church again, it would be a Catholic church. I like that old school sitting in the pews with stained glass windows. That speaks to me more than, let's say, a church where it's loud and people are singing and
Rock band.
Mega church style stuff. Yeah.
Right. That doesn't speak to me as much as I feel like religion is a sacred experience. And so that's why I really like Catholicism. But the reason why I don't necessarily practice Catholicism anymore is because I felt too much put into this box. I'm a very black and white, all or nothing kind of person. And so for me, when I didn't really agree with certain aspects of the Catholic Church, I was like, well, then I guess I'm not Catholic. Which, when I talk to people, isn't necessarily how all people are. Like, I talk to Catholic people who are like, oh yeah, I don't agree with everything the Catholic Church does either, but I'm still Catholic. I'm like, really? That for me, I was like, well, it's all or nothing.
Yeah. This is what I think is so fascinating about it, though, is that there are like people who are hardcore in whatever religion you're talking about, where they have to believe in everything exactly as it comes out, the structure, like they got to be into it 100%. But it's like, there's also like non-practicing people that will still say I'm Catholic or I'm Jewish or I'm whatever, and then they are completely okay to still be a part of the religion, but not have to embrace every aspect of that religion. And it's part of the conversation about spirituality that I think is so neat, is that everybody kind of gets to decide what they want to believe. And then that this judgy part of religion, like lots of people feel judged by a religion or feel excluded from a religion, ostracized by it for whatever reason, that you get to define for yourself how you want your spiritual and or religious experience to look like.
It's like a buffet.
Yes. And I was raised, I'm not Catholic. I was raised in a United Methodist denomination. And, lots of my family members have been pastors and, some of them went to seminaries. And so I have the same like nostalgic, warm feeling about sitting in the pews and singing and all of the, it just feels good. It feels like home, to me.
Yeah.
It is crazy overwhelming, though, the idea of like trying to find a church You know, like, because I know that so much of the time, like when people move to a new area, or maybe the church that they were with, just they weren't driving with it anymore, that they wanted to like find a new church. And it's kind of like dating, or, you know, like,
It's like
that you have to find a place that you jam with, you know, where you feel like you fit, where the people, and that when you go to a new church, everybody wants to like embrace you, you know, and make you really comfy and cozy. And that almost makes me, I mean, it does make me not want to do it at all. Like there's something almost icky and weird to me, like the idea that a church is courting me, or that I'm like evaluating all these different churches. That, yeah, it's just always been something that as an adult anyway, I've been like, yeah, I just don't feel like I'm up for that. But not for lack of missing that, you know, connection a lot of times. So let's talk about like religion as based on this Gallup article, that so many people are like, I don't affiliate with any religious, you know, but a lot of them, if you get further into the article, and I could have read the whole thing and given, there was tons of stats associated with it. What percentage of these people that say they're not religious do feel like they're spiritual? That has religion left a bad taste in our mouths, you know, like, because you can go, and this is not just about Catholicism, you know, like all religions have their things where people are like, ooh, I don't know about all that. Like there's good people and there's bad people in every religion. But what is it that has pushed so many people out? You know, like how do we bridge this gap with the bad taste we have in our mouths?
Oh, of course, as a Catholic, it's easy to identify where our like little like, oh, pedophiles.
Clearly.
Easy.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, the heads of the church and the leaders of the church are kind of corrupted in this very specific manner. And it's one of those like Christian ideas that's like, you can only judge, you know, a bush by the fruit that it creates.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, yeah, well, we're not, our leaders are even the worst of it. And so it's kind of like, oh, can I still be Catholic?
Like, how do you reconcile that?
And still hate the Catholic Church a little bit for what it's done. Like, and I mean, we've just had a nasty history. Like, women, not so great. Our treating of other religions in generals.
Right.
You know, we had lots of history of tons of bloodshed. So it's like, oh, is this still worth it? Should I still be a part of it? Should I still, and as a person who's moral and focused on trying to seek good, should I still even be, is this community worth fighting for and lifting up and helping it evolve? Or should I just let it go, let it die, and then seek out something that more resonates with me? And that's, you know, that's a hard choice to try and figure out, for sure. Do I have any answers? No.
Yeah. I mean, well,
I mean, I will say one thing I miss about church is the community.
Yeah.
And with raising a child where her parents aren't necessarily religious, but we believe in something bigger than ourselves. I mean, Aaron and I have talked at length about joining a church, but we don't believe in any, I mean, I don't want to say we don't believe. We don't.
I like the word resonate.
It doesn't resonate. Yes, thank you. We don't resonate with something as strongly to like become members and to really like affiliate with something to be a part of. So thank you to my in-laws for taking Adelaide to church because that really helps me out, which has been great because Adelaide does feel like she has that community. It makes me a little sad that Aaron and I can't give that to her at the moment. And I'm not ruling it out, though. Sure. I'm not saying that will never happen. If I find a situation that I feel I can fully commit to and resonate with, then I'm all about it. It's just that hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
And I think another thing that I kind of want to like go back to, mostly because you're like, I want my daughter to do it because I'd had it when I grew up. And it's this idea, this is another thing kind of we talked about on Friday, but this idea that for children, it's so easy and it's so nice. It's easy to say like Jesus and to imagine this God figure as a man who lived 2,000 years ago and told me what's right and what's wrong.
Right.
And you're kind of, as you grow up, it's harder because you're like, Disney princesses aren't real.
Yep.
You know, their superheroes aren't real. This super God might fall into the not real category now.
Yeah.
And as an adult, you have to then reconcile, well, okay, so history is a little funny, and we say like things of the past happened like, all the time. We're like, yeah, Noah, floods. Well, there's floods.
Right.
Why couldn't he have built a boat? Why not? And then, Jesus died. Well, he's only one guy, but one guy could have possibly risen from the dead, and you try to figure out what your experience with the world is and then how to match it up with this new understanding of what God is and how God has tried to reach into your own life or into the lives of humanity.
Yeah. Well, and I also love this idea that all religions, no matter where you are, have virtually the same set of like tenets or guidelines or ways you're supposed to behave, the ways that you're supposed to do that. There is this space of belief that you have to believe and that you have to have faith in this belief, and that without that, like I've had parts of my life where I didn't believe in anything, that was a higher power or a space. And those are consequently like the times in my life that were the most painful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That were the hardest to get through, that gave me that sense of like, what's the point? Like that not having a connection to this higher power, this belief in something that's greater than you, makes it really hard as a human to function, which I think is why we want to believe those things as children or adults or wherever we are, But then you take something like an organized religion where then these are not higher powers. These are just men that have written these guidelines, rules, doctrines, are judging behaviors as sinful or not, that are telling you where men and women fit into these hierarchies. That starts to take it on a turn where then I'm not suspending my disbelief in this higher power or this higher source. Then I'm saying I trust you as a man to tell me what it is that I should believe, think, and feel. And in my opinion, that's where we get really crossed wires between religion and spirituality, because I trust infinitely now a higher power and higher source. I just don't trust men. Is what it comes down to. And I don't mean men as a gender. I just mean like man as a species,
right.
I don't, I maybe don't trust men very much either, but a handful of men are worthy of trust. But know that I don't trust the human element in the interpretation of my personal connection with this higher power and source. And so that's one of the things I love about the spirituality conversation is that I don't need anybody else to translate for me where that's concerned. I got it,
And I think that man as a species.
There you go.
Translating the Bible, we vaguely got into this on our pre-interview talk on Friday. And, the Bible has been weaponized to tear us apart. I don't mean all the time. I'm just saying in some instances. We want to talk about the LGBTQ community, the
women in general,
word, the word used, people want to throw out Bible verses talking about man shall not lay with man. Well, the original text meant pedophiles, not homosexuals, and that was something that came along later. And
the church wasn't like a fan of that narrative. They're like, nah, pedophiles are fine. No, I'm kidding.
They were like, let's not go there.
Oh my God. I hope that none of your Catholic connections are listening.
They're all
now.
listening. It's great.
No, but yeah, that like man translating the word of God, I feel like is a little dangerous,
That was one of the reasons I kind of went into religious studies. I had that same frustration when I was younger and kind of rebellious about it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take it back, like super far back. And I'm not going to read any English translations because that was Martin Luther and he was going to, do his own thing. And then I took it back all the way to Hebrew, which turns out it's not translatable, mostly because they forgot to use vowels in biblical Hebrew. So it made real complicated. Yeah. But I wanted to dive into that. One of the things in that journey that I found, which was really interesting, and Parker Palmer kind of talks about it in his book, Let Your Life Speak, was this idea that God had a name. and we all kind of know it. YHWH is the quote unquote name of God that he gave. That I can't even say God's a he. That God gave Moses.
There you go.
Whenever he was when Moses was having a direct relationship with God with the burning bush, and Moses asked, "What am I supposed to say? Who am I supposed to say told me to go to the Pharaoh? Like, how am I supposed to talk to Pharaoh and say that I have a higher entity that's telling me?" He's like, "Okay, what should I call you?" And God said, YHWH, or the Tetragrammaton. And it's actually a phrase that has really been a catalyst for my spiritual journey with God. And it was that God named God's self, I am who I am, or I am who am. And it's this idea, and it's kind of back to spirituality and this idea of personal theology as what is God? God is who God is. And God, as the creator, created each of us to be who we are. And I've kind of extrapolated and jumped to this theological idea that, not alone, with help, but
Sure.
that we were created for a purpose. And it's our job to find our most inner self and to listen to it so that we are able to live out that purpose, that being, and to honor that purpose and that being in our everyday life. And so one of the things that I kind of worked with when going all the way back to that Hebrew was, who am I? And this happened, I got my major when I was in my 20s, my early 20s. So it's kind of like, who am I? What am I supposed to be? And trying to find my most true inner voice to then express that to the world.
This is why you need a Jackie Rothschild in your life.
Doubt. I mean, it gives me chills, listening to it. I love it.
Because Jackie and I, as close as we are, consider ourselves, we always said, and we said it at each other's weddings, that God didn't make us sisters because there's no way our parents could handle us.
Yeah.
And for even as close as Jackie and I are, we are completely different people. And I've always felt that because I didn't, take on to Catholicism quite like my best friend over here, not that I ever thought Jackie would judge me. I was never afraid of her judging me because I know she's going to love me no matter what. But there's tons of Christians in the world that are like, well, I love you, but I don't love that about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter where I've been in my spiritual journey, with my religious journey, whether I've been going to church or I haven't been going to church, whether I'm an asshole or I haven't been an asshole, this girl has always approached me with this Christ-like love that I don't get from, a whole lot of people. And the fact that she's educated in it helps because she, I feel like her religious studies background, I'm talking about you as if you're not here. I feel like your religious studies background has opened your worldview of this extremely non-judgmental place, and that you love all humans and all religions and all beliefs. And I just wish that there was more of that. And if more people could be like Jackie Rothschild, we would be in a much
straight up better place.
Better place.
Totally.
I want to talk a little bit about Jackie's journey of not becoming a nun.
Well, absolutely. For a couple of reasons. I love the story so much only because it's not at all what I expected. Because you had told me that Jackie wanted to be a nun at some point. And so I've known this for a long time, but it wasn't until a few days ago that I had heard the story about it. And I love it that it's based out of this perspective of wanting to be a badass lady,
Yes.
and so tell us this,
Yes.
tell us the story, Jackie. It's so good.
All right. Well, it kind of started in high school, probably before that. But this idea that I wanted to be an A student for Jesus. So I went to Catholic school my whole life, and I wanted to be the tippy top of what you could be. And the Catholics had kind of like laid it out for you. They're like, well, if you want to be the tippy top, be a nun. Like, as a woman, be a nun. And I was like, okay, cool. And it comes from a lot of different Bible verses, this idea that if you want to be someone who speaks on behalf of God, which, yes, I want to speak on behalf of God.
That's pretty powerful.
You're a policeman? I'm a prophet.
Try me.
So I really wanted to find this. And some of the sociological, parameters around it was you had to be a virgin, and you had to, it comes from Paul, this idea that you can't have a family. The family will distract you. You need to dedicate yourself completely to God. And it even came from Greek mythology. Athena was a badass. Artemis was a badass. Question?
Not a question, statement, if I may. I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm just saying from a teenager's perspective, try going out with your best friend. You're like this. I mean, I wasn't a wild kid, but I was boy crazy, and I so badly wanted to rebel, but Jackie and I were just really good kids. We're we didn't do that, but I was always boy crazy and wanting to go out and stay out late, and I'm with my best friend who wants to be a nun. It was just a really interesting dynamic.
Still boy crazy.
You were boy crazy, but
I was I got better things to do.
Yes. Right, you were oh, but I have this bigger vision. And I was I just like boys. And you were I want to be a nun.
I like Freddie Prinze Jr. too, but I gotta focus.
Okay. Anyway, so Greek mythology.
So Artemis was badass. Athena was badass. They were virgins. They couldn't have sex with guys. It was okay, I'll follow these examples. These old, historic, very powerful stories, I'm going to follow in their footsteps. And then I got to college, still boy crazy. Don't get me wrong. I was okay, I'm going to live up my...
You dated.
I'm going to live up my life. That's in the future, though. It's everyone who's going to be a mom. I'm going to have my fun until I have my kid, and then I'll, be boring or whatever. Even though it turns out you can still have fun when having a kid.
Sure.
But anyways, so in college, I came to the realization only when studying. I had to hit it face on. I was studying in Rome. I was studying under a priest who was from Malta, a tiny island. He was a, advisor to the Pope. This guy was the tops. And we were at an all-women's college, and thankfully my university had a program in Rome that was still all women's. And he was yeah, and you could be the mother to a pope, or you could be a sister to a pope, and you could be a friend to a pope. And I was wait, time out. I'm 20 years old, Catholic all my life. I can't be a pope? And I didn't realize it, which is pretty stupid. I probably shouldn't call myself stupid, but that was pretty dumb. That, I should have realized that a lot earlier, but I realized I couldn't be pope. And I had a lot of conversations. People were oh, you can be the head of your order. And I was yeah, but I can't be pope. And which is a really prideful thing. Do you want me to be pope? No. But I still wanted it on my journey. I don't want to be CEO, but I'm still going to rise up in the ranks, and I'm going to have a goal that is beyond my scope. And I realized in this journey, the Pope was a smaller thing, but it's just a funny part of the story, that I didn't want to be... I didn't agree with these ideas of what a woman was and a woman had to be. And I had a lot of great, powerful women in my life who were also not what we would call lay, who weren't, ordained, and powerful, impressive women that I was you know what? I want to be more like them. And I also really like boys.
You're it turns out.
And turns out boys are real fun.
Yeah, actually.
As I sit here, married now. But it kind of was this idea that I was okay, I want to be this A student for Jesus. But as I grew up, I realized not that I could be an A student for Jesus in my everyday life, but more that Brene Brown perfectionism, maybe you should not aim for these ideas that have been created from a history of oppressing women and creating a woman who is only one thing, and more understand what the world is trying to create of you. And the world would be that, women have to be this. You should listen to your own heart and try and figure out what your place is and what your message is. Still be a prophet, but, actually listen to God rather than the men who are out there telling you who and what you can and cannot be.
I was not smart enough to know when we were that young that like you wanting to be a nun was almost a feminist statement.
Right.
But that also you not wanting to be a nun was a feminist statement because in the church, women can't be that.
Yeah, can't be a priest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I've known 2 nuns actually, like personally anyway. And both of them are like really badass feminist style, like they don't take no shit.
Yeah.
They do what they want. Yeah. They break the rules. They are practical in a way that is inspiring, Yeah. And I have a lot of women in my family that have, done really amazing things in the name of God and religion that have been super inspiring. But I'm in my 40s now before I've really started to study like the divine, sacred, feminine aspect in a lot of these religions, but specifically in Catholicism and in Christianity. And I'm fascinated by this idea because we've done episodes on like masculine and feminine energies, right? Mm-hmm. But that the divine feminine is a huge piece of religious history that was kind of stolen and robbed from us, in a lot of respects that has come up in the last 20 or 30 years where there's like actual gospels and scriptures that you can read that were written by women, that uncover these parts of spirituality and religion that I have sorely needed my whole life, that now that I've got access to them and I can actually move through them, a lot of them are gospels written by Mary Magdalene, and that they so point to this idea of getting in touch with your own true nature, with the voice that you hear, and that you have a direct heart connection to God, and that using that and listening to that and acting on that is your superpower. And that if I had heard that and believed that and understood that at 17, and if there were women in religion that were encouraging you to cut out the noise, and to not worry about your sinful nature, and to not have shame around your natural tendencies and inclinations, because for as bad as I'm sure you two were, I'm having a feeling I was probably a lot worse than you are.
I think you were probably a lot worse.
Yeah,
than me,
that
we were pretty
talking
lame.
about teenage and college age, Laurie. That there were a lot of things that I did that totally got me cast out of that religious net pretty quickly. But that wasn't for lack of me still feeling shameful about it, and feeling like I was bad. Like that made me bad, and therefore this religious space that everybody else existed in was not for me.
Yeah.
And so it pushed me so far to the other end of the spectrum that then I was like, okay, I'm sinful and bad. I best explore that. I best to see what that's all about, And it turns out that like I didn't find what I was looking for in that either, And so there's this pendulum thing that goes back and forth. But now I'm so fascinated by this divine, sacred, feminine aspect of religion and spirituality because it's healing these parts of me that as a late teenager and early 20-year-old, I hated on myself a lot, for things that are just completely God-like, that were put there for a reason, that given the opportunity to explore that in a way where you didn't feel like you were doing something wrong, could have changed the whole game, and could have saved me a lot of grief and difficult lessons. So yeah, I'm loving the idea that the reason you're not a nun was also because you were like, what do you mean I can't be Pope? Like, something about that's not quite right. We've got a really cool Pope right now, by the way. Definitely shifting things in the world of Catholicism.
No kidding. He's spun it on its head a few times.
I'm here for it. I wonder what religion's going to look like in 100 years. How different, because even just in the last, even in the last 100 years, there's lots of new religious, orders that have come up. If you're talking about, I don't know how old Scientology is. Not that old.
Scientology was developed in the 50s, I believe.
In the last 100 years, at least.
Yeah. By L. Ron Hubbard. I'm a little obsessed.
Well,
I know. It's a total, rabbit hole. I'm obsessed with Scientology.
Or if you... I mean, I don't know that much about Mormons, but I saw the Book of Mormon on Broadway, and
Golden plates.
yeah, totally. Like, so
200 something years old.
Yeah.
Like Mormonism is as old as America is. Really.
right. So the idea that there are these like new religions that are birthed out, and created, and that people are grasping a hold of these things and pulling them into orbits, and they are also very far-fetched stories, like you would see in traditional, Catholic or Christian religions.
It's all far-fetched.
It's really fascinating, and I'm so curious.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. Like, it's all far-fetched, but we're like, oh, we got 2,000 years to give us like that buffer. We're
Right.
like, it happened back like 2,000 years ago. Like, that totally happened. Like, there were dinosaurs. Like, these are all possibilities. But like, you're like, oh, it was only 200 years ago. You came up with that, and we're supposed to believe that?
Nice try, Mormonism.
Yeah, nice.
Like, no.
Like, haha. But like, it is kind of this like, they have a different challenge because they are so new.
Right.
And,
Right.
And information has just come leaps and bounds. I wanted to go back to this idea of theology, like as a woman who studied at an all-women's college, Catholicism and like religions, even the idea that women hadn't been able to write, study, think about God, as theologians or as, anthropologists, there are leaps and bounds that are being made by women. Like I can't remember her name, and I wrote it down. I was like, dang it. She Who is this theology and looking at God as a woman. And so they tried to understand a narrative and tried to extrapolate this idea based on God as a woman. Like, let's look at Mother Earth.
Yeah.
Let's look at, and let's like pull out feminine qualities of God, because God doesn't have a gender. So God has that female side. Let's understand that and get a wider understanding of God because of it. So yeah, and it's just fascinating what it's going to evolve and become with these new voices, and with, even transgender people will understand the non-binary nature of God more than we could
100%.
ever imagine. And I can't wait to hear that thought process that is so different from my own experience.
Yeah.
I love that. And, I love everything that you're saying, because I remember a long time ago, Jackie, you had introduced this idea to me that God could be a woman. And I was like, you say what?
Say, huh?
Because like we were not raised with that. And so for someone like Jackie, who I lovingly called Captain Catholic my whole life, like introducing this idea to me that God could be a woman or nothing at all, gender-wise, that I was like, whoa, if someone like Jackie could wrap their brain around this concept, like that's pretty cool and deep. And so what I'm saying is you gave me permission to explore those ideas and to feel okay questioning that.
Well, and I love, one of my favorite things that came up out of us talking a few days ago was that God is diversity.
Yes.
Can you speak on that a little bit? Because it was
what you
just,
said
some of the most
awesome.
beautiful stuff we hit on was this God is diversity.
Robert Barron is Aquinas. So this is going to go, a guy who has a really bad history with women in general. Like his father was like, you're going to have sex with a woman. He like chased a woman with a poker, like a prostitute, out of his room because he's like, I hate women. He's one of my favorite theologians.
Okay.
I had to tweak him a little. Other people have to tweak him a little. You're like, just ignore that part. Was his ideas and his theories of God. And so one of his kind of things that people know about him is his writing called Summa Theologica. And he has 10 questions at the very beginning that's like, what is God? And he kind of goes through the Bible, and then he goes through, and one of the things is God is one. So like having binary men or women, God can't, because God is one. And this unknowability of God is very pervasive in his, like, you just can't know God because you are a creature. You're by nature two different things, a soul and a body. Form and matter is what he calls it. So just a complete unknowability of God. And so we're going to try and understand God, but we're not going to get there. And one of one of kind of the things that we took out of it was that as images, individual images of God, we're still going to be images of God. We're just going to be small fragments. And each of us is a color in the rainbow, just a different shade. And by combining being our true self and combining those different shades, we're going to be able to see God. And Robert Barron kind of goes into this idea of beauty, and he describes it as something that resonates with you, something that it's a luminosity to it, has a resonance to it, that you see in other people and you see God. Like you have that moment of, hairs, getting goose pimpled, or your soul really connecting. And it's kind of this idea that's like, yes, that's beautiful. God is beautiful. And what's interesting about beauty is it's different to every single person. Mm-hmm. But it's that rainbow of humanity, we can see God better. And it's been one of my favorite, teachings about God as well. So that's Thomas Aquinas. But again, he's got some weird stuff.
I mean, we've all got our things.
Yeah, right?
One of the other things that I wanted to make sure that we touched on here was that, like, if you go all the way back to early stage Christianity, that you were like, it was really just people getting together and talking about God.
Yeah.
Like we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Like that, and that used to be what worship and church and having a community of people that you come together was, just getting together and talking about God, and that there weren't things that were off topic or not allowed to come out on the table. And you were able to challenge and ask questions and, like come up with different perspectives around things. And that in organized religion, I feel like we've gotten a lot further away from that idea, that if what it was about on Sundays or Tuesdays or whatever day you want to get together and do it was just hanging out with your friends and talking about your spiritual connection to your higher power and how that's serving you or not serving you, or where you're struggling or where you have success, that is only opening up more opportunity for people to get connected to their individual relationships, like that we don't need it to be fitting in this box and in this web where like everything is, X, Y, and Z, that it can be very subjective to what it is that your connection is, and that was such a beautiful thing when you said that, because I was like, yeah, it really should be like that, where let's just get together and talk about it and explore it and make it okay.
Yeah.
Like that whatever comes up is cool because we did it, and that we're nourished by that with each other. So I love that we did this. It makes me so proud and happy.
Me too.
Are we time?
We're pretty close to time.
Okay.
Pretty
I'm
close.
like, okay, let me tell you about the Talmud, Jewishness, and then I'll tell you.
we can always do a part 2.
No doubt.
No. But I was just like, okay, wait, slow down. But yeah, no, touching on that.
Yeah.
It was, early Christianity. It was Paul, like this guy who was like, I'm called by God, writing letters to groups of people who were, getting together, and eating food, sharing food, and trying to live better lives, like trying to do something with themselves and to spread hope, love, peace, all the good stuff.
I'm here for it, Paul. I like it. All right, ladies. I so appreciate you coming.
Yes,
on
thank
the
you.
show.
Thank you.
It made all of this so rich and beautiful. And if you were touched by anything that we brought up today, please comment and like and share this episode with someone you think it might help. Get together with your friends and share some food and some good thoughts and love and light. And you badasses have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Nice to meet you.